my voice to the sky above.
Her voice rose without warning. No drums, no ceremony, just a woman standing in the fading light, opening her mouth and releasing something that did not belong to this world. Children stopped chasing each other. Market women forgot their stalls. Old men who had not cried since their own fathers died felt something move behind their eyes. The sound was not just beautiful. It was the kind of beautiful that breaks something open inside you. The kind that makes you feel seen and lost and found all at the same time. And then she stopped. She closed her mouth and she never sang again. Not because she chose to stop, but because that song was the price. To understand what Obiageli gave up that night, you must first understand what she was born carrying. A curse she never asked for. A bloodline that loved too deeply and lost too completely. Stay with me, because this story will ask you something before it ends. In Umuocha, they said some children were born with gifts the gods pressed into their chests before sending them to earth. A gift for farming, a gift for healing, a gift for knowing when rain was coming 3 days before the clouds arrived. Obiageli was born with a voice. She was the daughter of Nwaioji and her husband Dike, a quiet carpenter who built things carefully and loved his family the same way. Their compound sat at the western end of Umuocha, near the stream that ran cold even in dry season. From the time she could form words, she sang them instead of speaking them. Her mother would call her name and Obiageli would answer in melody. She sang at the stream, she sang while grinding pepper, she sang at funerals and made the grieving weep deeper and heal faster at the same time. By the time she was 12, people came from neighboring villages just to hear her. Elders said her voice carried the prayer of the ancestors, that it opened something between this world and the next. Her father would sit outside their hut on evenings when she sang and close his eyes. That sound, he told her mother once, cannot have come from us alone. And he was right, but not in the way he meant. But there was something else the women of Obiageli's bloodline carried. Something spoken of only in whispers. Something her grandmother had tried to warn her mother about before she died. Her grandmother, Mama Nena, loved a man completely, built a life with him, watched him die of a sudden illness 2 years after their wedding. Her business, which had flourished for years, collapsed the same season. People called it bad luck, but Mama Nena knew better. Before she died, she called Obiageli's mother to her mat and said words that Nwaanyoji had never fully understood. Our bloodline made a covenant long ago with a spirit of abundance, Mama Nena whispered. We were given gifts beyond measure, but the covenant had a dark side. Every woman of our blood who loves deeply will watch that love be taken. Every success will be built on sand until the debt is paid. What debt? Nwaanyoji asked, but Mama Nena had closed her eyes and did not open them again. Nwaanyoji had dismissed the words as the ramblings of an old woman until her own husband, Dike, died on a Tuesday morning without warning, until her thriving fabric business folded within months, until she sat alone in her compound one night and finally understood what her mother had been trying to tell her. She never told Obiageli, because what mother tells her gifted child that the universe has already decided to take from her? So, Obiageli grew up singing, not knowing what was coming, not knowing that every note she released into the world was on borrowed time. Obiageli was 22 when she met Chukwuemeka, He was a teacher from Onitsha who had come to Umuocha to visit a cousin and stayed 3 extra days because he heard a woman singing at the stream and could not make himself leave. He found her on the 3rd morning, standing at the water's edge, eyes closed, singing to nobody and everybody. When she opened her eyes and found him watching, she did not stop. She finished the song first. Then she looked at him and said simply, "You have been standing there long enough to hear the full thing." He laughed, she smiled, and something between them began. They married within a year. The whole of Umuocha celebrated. Drums for 3 days, her voice soaring above the celebration like a bird that owned the sky. In the first year of their marriage, Obiageli was happier than she had ever been. Chukwuemeka was kind and quiet and steady. He loved her the way she sang, completely, without reservation. She fell pregnant. The whole village rejoiced. And then, one morning, Chukwuemeka did not wake up. He was 31 years old. The doctor said it was his heart, but Obiageli sat beside his body and felt something she had no medical name for. She felt the curse. For the first time in her life, she felt the exact weight of what her bloodline had been carrying. And she understood in that silent room that she had only just begun to lose. Firstly, she buried Chukwuemeka and named their son Nana in memory of his father. She held her grief with one hand and her newborn son with the other. For a while, Nana was enough. He had his father's eyes, his father's quiet way of watching the world before speaking. Obiageli poured everything she had into that child. And she still sang, not for the village anymore, just for Nana at night. Soft songs that she breathed into his hair until he slept. The village watched and said she was strong. They did not know she was simply waiting, even when she did not know what she was waiting for. When Nana was 4, Obiageli opened a small trading store at the Umuocha market. She sold fabric. She had her mother's eye for quality and her own instinct for color. The store grew. Within 2 years, she had 3 stores. Within 3, she was supplying fabric to traders in 2 neighboring towns. The village nodded with approval. She was rising. She was surviving. Then one Harmattan morning, a fire started in the market. Nobody knew how. By the time it was extinguished, 3 years of her work had burned to nothing. She stood in the ash and did not cry, because somewhere deep inside her, she had already known. She rebuilt, slower this time, smaller. And Nana grew into a boy who made her laugh again. He was clever and warm and had started singing, not well, but with the same fearless openness his mother had. One evening, he ran to her at the stream, showed her a small cut on his knee, demanded a song to make it better. She sang. He smiled. He ran off. That was the last full conversation they had. That same night, Nana developed a fever. 3 days later, the fever had not broken. 7 days later, Obiageli was sitting beside a second small body, a second person she had loved completely. Gone. After Nana, Obiageli stopped singing in public. She still heard melodies in her head. She still felt music move through her like breath, without effort, without choice. But she did not open her mouth. She was afraid, not of the song, but of what loving the song too much might cost her next. She began to understand what Mama Nena had tried to say. The covenant demanded payment for gifts received, and the currency it preferred was love. But what Obiageli did not yet know, what nobody in Umuocha knew, was that the curse was not finished, and the only person who could tell her how to end it was someone she had never met, someone who had been waiting for her to be ready. They say in Umocha that when the ancestors are ready for you to know something, they send a messenger. What happened next was not a coincidence. Nothing in this story ever was. She came to Obiageli's compound on a Thursday morning. An old woman nobody had seen before. No one knew where she came from. She did not greet anyone at the gate. She simply walked to where Obiageli was sitting outside her hut and sat across from her in the dust as though she had been invited. "You have stopped singing," the old woman said, not a question. Obiageli looked at her. "Who are you?" "Someone who knew your grandmother and her mother before her." Silence settled between them, like something that had been waiting a long time to arrive. "The covenant your bloodline made," the old woman said, "was made out of desperation. Your ancestor was starving. Her children were dying. She went to the river spirit and begged for abundance. The spirit gave it, but spirits do not give freely." "What was the price?" Obiageli asked. "Every generation, the most gifted woman of the blood must eventually offer the gift itself back. The abundance came through a gift. Only the gift can close the door." Obiageli was quiet for a long time. "My voice," she said. The old woman nodded. "If I give it up, the debt is paid. The curse ends with you. Your bloodline after you will love freely, build freely, lose nothing they were not meant to lose." Obiageli looked at her hands, the hands that had buried a husband, a son, a business, a life she had built twice. "And if I keep it?" The old woman looked at her with the specific compassion of someone delivering truth that cannot be softened. "Then it continues, through you, through your daughters if you have them, through their daughters after that." The morning birds were singing in the mango tree above them. Obiageli listened to them for a long time. Then she asked the question that had been sitting in her chest since she was a girl. "Did my grandmother know she was passing this to us?" The old woman shook her head slowly. "She only knew she was saving her children. That is what mothers do." And that answer, somehow, made it easier. Obiageli sat with that decision for 7 days. 7 days of silence. 7 days of listening to the world with the knowledge that she was about to say goodbye to the only part of herself that had survived everything. On the 7th evening, she rose. She bathed slowly. She dressed in her best wrapper, the deep blue one with gold thread that she had worn on her wedding day. She walked to the iroko tree at the center of Umocha. She did not announce anything. She did not call anyone. She simply stood there as the sun began to lower itself behind the hills. The first person to notice was a child chasing a goat near the square. The child stopped because something in the air had changed. Then a woman coming from the stream paused on the path. Then a man sitting outside his hut looked up from his work. One by one, without being summoned, Umocha came. They came the way people come when something sacred is about to happen and the body knows before the mind does. Obiageli opened her mouth, and the sound that came out was everything she had ever been. It was the song she sang to Chukwuemeke the morning after they married. It was the night song she breathed into Nana's hair when he was afraid of the dark. It was the grief of 2 funerals and the joy of a life loved completely and the specific loneliness of carrying something too heavy for too long. It was all of it, at once, released. People wept without knowing why. Children clutched their mothers. Old women rocked slowly with their eyes closed. Even the trees seemed to lean in. I want to ask you something right now. If you were Obiageli, if the only way to free everyone you would ever love was to give up the one gift that made you who you are, could you do it? Tell me honestly in the comments, because what she did next took a kind of courage most of us will never be asked for. She sang for a long time. Long enough for the stars to appear. Long enough for the night insects to join her. Long enough for every person in Umocha to receive something they would carry for the rest of their lives. And then she let the last note go. She felt it leave her body. Not like losing a voice, like releasing a bird that had been kept too long indoors. The silence that followed was the most complete silence Umocha had ever known. And in that silence, something shifted. Something old and heavy and inherited. Something that had been sitting on the chest of her bloodline for longer than anyone living could remember. It lifted. Obiageli felt it go. She stood under the iroko tree and felt for the first time in her life a lightness that had nothing to do with happiness and everything to do with freedom. She closed her eyes. She opened her mouth. Nothing came. Not a note, not a hum, not even the memory of music. Her voice was gone. Completely. Finally. Forever. She did not collapse. She did not cry. She simply stood there for a moment longer. Then she turned and walked home. Past the faces of people who did not yet understand what they had just witnessed. Past the iroko tree that had held the sound of her whole life for a final evening. Past the compound where her husband once laughed and her son once ran. And into the rest of her life. Quiet, unburdened, free. They say in Umocha that after that night, the village felt different. That children born after Obiageli's last song seemed lighter somehow, less burdened. That the women of her bloodline who came after her loved without losing, built without watching things burn, grieved normally the way grief is supposed to work, arriving, staying for a while, then slowly leaving room for something else. Obiageli lived a long, quiet life. She never sang again, not one note. But people who sat with her in her later years said she had a way of listening to music that was different from anyone else. As if the gift, though silent, had simply changed its form. Some things are inherited that we never asked to carry. Some debts were made before we were born. But the courage to end them, that belongs only to the one who chooses to. Obiageli chose. And in choosing, she gave her bloodline something no ancestor had ever been able to give them. A future without chains. Until next time, bye.